Okay, welcome back to Neil Ratner Rock Doc's Reading Room, where I'm serializing my book, Rock Doc. All right, last week we talked about the part in the book where I talked about Max's Kansas City and the Chelsea Hotel, and I was road manager for Edgar Winter's White Trash. And after that, I started to work for D. Anthony, which I have talked about earlier in the book. And now I'm going to go back to when D set me out on my first tour with Emerson Lake and Palmer. I hadn't met him, we became friendly, and here I am out on an Emerson Lake and Palmer tour, and it's a whole lot different than it was with Edgar Winter. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, here we go. As my career progressed, the lifestyle improved. Emerson Lake and Palmer toured in a rented private jet. We had a little Learjet. And were ferried around in large stretch limos, usually one for each of the guys. Everywhere we went, we were treated like royalty and had suites in the best hotels and meals in Michelin-starred restaurants. The drugs were plentiful and of high quality, and then there were the groupies, an important and ever-present part of touring. Besides the obvious, they provided support and companionship and often traveled with the band. Emerson, Lake and Palmer seemed to attract a particularly sophisticated group of young ladies. Nice hotel rooms, good food, and female companionship all helped to make touring more pleasant. But being a tour manager was tough. You know, I've talked about this before. This is back in the early 70s, before computers and cell phones and, you know, lots of writing things down and lots of hard-line telephone calls from an office or a hotel room or from wherever. Not easy. And then there's, you know, keeping track of the money and the road crew and everything else. It was not an easy job. But, hey, that was rock and roll. Okay. Most mornings, I got the band up and out to the airport for either a commercial or a private flight to the next city. After I checked the group into the hotel, I went to the venue. Once things were set up and the road crew was ready for the sound check, I went back to the hotel to get the group. 1 hour before the show, I gave a pep talk in the dressing room and made sure there were no bad vibes. I was also responsible for getting the group on stage, as close to schedule as possible. Always a challenge. During the concert, I listened to the show from different places around the venue to make sure the sound and lights were good. I also stopped at the box office to count ticket stubs and get the money. Then I headed backstage to give the band towels when they came off the stage and see that they went back out for an encore. After the show, I still had to get the band to the hotel and make sure the crew loaded out quickly and efficiently. I tried to go to sleep by 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. at the latest, since I knew it would all start all over again the next day. Some gigs, like Mari Soul, a 3-day rock festival in Puerto Rico, were much harder than others. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of Mari Soul, but it was the Puerto Rican Pop Festival was the other name. And it really had an amazing lineup of people with ELP and the Allman Brothers, an unknown Billy Joel, Black Sabbath, Dave Brubeck with Jerry Mulligan, The Faces. I mean, incredible lineup. And it was promoted by this guy, Alice Cooley, who had done the Atlanta Pop Festival. But as you'll hear, it was not exactly the most well-run festival, and there were all kinds of problems. All right. Okay, Emerson, Lake and Palmer toured with tons of specialized equipment. So the promoter arranged for a cargo plane to meet us in Jacksonville, Florida, our last stop before Puerto Rico. Alice Cooper, the Allman Brothers, as I said, Faces with Rod Stewart, and Black Sabbath were all scheduled to perform there, and most had their own equipment. ELP was afraid the scene at San Juan Airport would be so chaotic, and they elected me to go on the cargo plane with the gear to keep track of it all. Just what I wanted to do. Trust me, that's not what I wanted to do. Here I was flying in a little private Learjet and traveling with the group, and all of a sudden they say, hey man, you got to go in this cargo plane. Okay. Now, I have a history of motion sickness, and although I'm usually okay with flying, this time I was worried, especially when I realized there was no navigator on the flight and I would have to sit in his jump seat. We left Jacksonville, Florida about 3 a.m. under light rain. As the plane climbed higher, the first thing I noticed was the drop in temperature. There was limited heat and it was cold. I had never traveled in the cockpit before, and I was amazed by the small size of the windshield, especially considering that the aircraft was a very large old military cargo plane. The rain started coming down in sheets, and it didn't seem as if the pilot could see anything. Then the turbulence started, and I thought the flight would never end. We finally made it to San Juan in the early morning. Somehow I didn't throw up. But I felt like shit. Yeah, I didn't throw up because I took a lot of Dramamine and stuff like that. I wasn't that crazy. But you can imagine, we played Jacksonville. I don't remember what time we finished, maybe 11 o'clock. By the time we loaded out, by the time we loaded onto the plane, wee hours of the morning, and then riding through the rain and the turbulence. But we make it to Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. I got the equipment loaded onto trucks to be driven to the festival grounds on the other side of the island. Then I took a waiting two-seater for a short flight to meet the trucks. It was Sunday morning, and the festival had started the day before, but when I arrived, things were quiet. The acts didn't start until 3 in the afternoon. After our equipment was away in a safe location, I took a helicopter to the Seramar Hotel. The helicopters were being used to get artists to and from the venue. So the Seramar Hotel was a really high-end, cool hotel in San Juan. And they put all the groups in that hotel. I don't know if they put all the groups there, but all the cool groups were there. And the scene at the hotel was like amazing, man. I got to the hotel and there were all these rock stars and chicks and you know, immediately, I felt much better after my flight that night and everything else. You know, I had a cocktail or something, and it was much better. At any rate, okay, I hadn't slept, needed a nap, but ELP had just arrived. As I said, the atmosphere at the hotel was cool. Rock stars could be seen milling about at many restaurants, bars, and pools within the complex. Then nighttime came, and we heard from some of the groups that there were major problems with the sound system. A rumor had also spread that 2 people had drowned. I was worried. All right, so you got to dig the scene. This is Puerto Rico. It's in the Caribbean. It's hot. The sun is beating down, and there's no shade. How do you create a festival with no shade in a place that's tropical? And the medical tent was ridiculous with people getting heat stroke and sunburn. 2 people actually had drowned. But, you know, the show must go on. But I was concerned because I knew things weren't good. And then to hear that there were problems with the sound system, knowing how important it is for a 3-piece to have good sound. All right, so. Okay, so. Then nighttime came, right, okay. Things got confusing. The promoters' representatives were telling multiple groups to get ready, but there weren't enough helicopters. And these were these little bubble helicopters that didn't take very many people. I remember them frantically trying to get John McLaughlin of the Mahavishnu Orchestra on a helicopter to the gig. He was to have been on an earlier one, but someone gave his seat away. When ELP got the call, I made sure there were enough helicopter seats. But we arrived only to find technical problems of our own. I got there. I saw what was going on. The group that played before us was the Allman Brothers. And I had seen the very end of the Allman Brothers set. Actually, there was a strange thing that went on where one of the security guys, because they had local guys who didn't really know so much, and one of the guys didn't know who Greg Allman was, wanted to beat him up, and I had to sort of break him up. I couldn't believe it. But anyway, Allman Brothers had done a set. They were setting up for us, and the sound was brutal. As soon as I got there, my road crew said, "We have real problems, man," you know. And the problems basically consisted of Keith's organ kept shorting out, and the road crew couldn't find the cause. And it was after 1 a.m. when the band finally got on stage. And we played for probably close to 3 hours because it was about 4 o'clock in the morning by the time we got back to the hotel. The set went great. I mean, we were pleased. As I said, Allman Brothers came before us and Alice Cooper went after us. But we were happy and we went back to the hotel. As far as we were concerned, it was a success. I went right to my room, collapsed on the bed, and fell asleep with my clothes on. So, that was basically Maury's soul. Of course, we left, and then we heard even more terrible things, including the fact that they were going to arrest the promoter, Alex Cooley. I guess it all worked out in the end, but to us it was okay, but to people who were there, and I don't know, maybe some of you out there were there and you could enlighten me that it wasn't as bad as we heard that it was. But at any rate, Puerto Rican Pop Festival. Funny story about going home. We flew home on a 747 and Dave Brubeck's band was on the plane. And Jerry Mulligan, the sax player, was there. And back in those days, 747s had a lounge upstairs with a piano. And Keith goes up, figures there's a piano up there and he's feeling good and he goes up, figures maybe he'll play it or something, and Jerry Mulligan is up there. The two start talking. Keith plays around on the piano. Jerry Mulligan goes and gets his sax, and for the next half hour or so, we sat up there in the lounge of the 747 listening to some incredible jazz by Keith Emerson and Jerry Mulligan. So that was it. At least my ride home was a lot better than my ride there. You know what? That's it. I'll read one more paragraph. Working for Emerson, Lake and Palmer and living in London took some getting used to. London was like New York City, but on Valium, slower and more civilized. I drank tea, not coffee, ate fish and chips instead of burgers, and most of all, drove on the wrong side of the road. All right. So that's as much as I'm going to read today, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me play my little... Okay, and that's it. Have a great week. Next week, where do we go next week? We're in London again. Maybe I'll talk about the speakeasy. Oh, no, next week I'll start there, but what I'm really going to talk about is road crews and how important they are. And I'll leave it at that. All right, that's it for today. Remember to keep on rocking. Join me somewhere. My Spotify list, iHeartRadio on the weekends. And I'll see you real soon. All right. Bye.